Welcome to Cardboard Content, where we aim to develop our skills and grow the competitive Commander community. Hey guys, it's me, Benedict. Thank you for joining me here on another week. We got a doozy of a game for you guys all today. So much interaction, people go back and forth, destroying things, countering things. But before that, we have our next event coming up, and we're giving away 4 Grim Monoliths to top 4. More on that after the game. In the upper right hand corner, we have Josh on Tivit, and then Dylan on Korvold, Ryan on Stella, and Cody on Marchesa. Everyone kept their initial starting hand of 7. Josh's player won, but Ryan and Dylan have a pregame. For Dylan's Gemstone Cavern, he exiles Underworld Breach, and for Ryan, he exiles a Fiery Islet. On Josh's turn, he plays a Sea of Clouds, then casts Esper Sentinel. On Dylan's turn, he casts Birds of Paradise, and then on his end step, Ryan casts Consider. Triggering Esper Sentinel, Josh draws 1. On Ryan's turn, he plays Training Center into a Felwar Stone and triggers Esper Sentinel again. On Cody's turn, he plays a Morphic Pool, then casts Mox Diamond, triggering Esper Sentinel again, and pitches a Swamp to the Mox Diamond. Exiles Simian Spirit Guide for a red, and casts a turn 1 Marchesa. On Josh's second turn, he plays Tundra into a Counterbalance. On Dylan's turn, he casts Felwar Stone, Esper Sentinel, then Counterbalance. Resolves Counterbalance and reveals an offer you can't refuse, then draws for Esper Sentinel. Then Dylan casts Imperial Seal, triggering Counterbalance again, and Josh reveals a Mox Opal. He passes turn to Ryan. On Ryan's turn, he plays a Volcanic Island into a Rite of Flame, triggers Esper Sentinel, and pays for Esper Sentinel, and then casts Personal Tutor, and tutors up a Timetwister. Then casts Gitaxian Probe, drawing the Timetwister, and then casting said Timetwister. Then Ryan passes turn. On Cody's turn, he shocks into Steam Vents, attacks with Marchesa to Dylan, and then passes turn. On Josh's turn, he casts Rhystic Study. Cody responds with a Fierce Guardianship, triggers his Marchesa, and counterbalance Esper Sentinel. He reveals a Grafdigger's Cage, Marchesa triggers, and Cody bins a Brotherhood's End. We move on to Dylan's turn. He plays a Badland, then casts Mana Crypt, triggers Esper Sentinel, then Dylan pays for Esper Sentinel. Then he casts 6 and passes turn to Ryan. On Ryan's turn, he plays Chromox, triggers Counterbalance, then Esper Sentinel. He draws and reveals a Dovin's Veto. Ryan imprints a Ragavan, then casts his commander Stella. Cody responds with a Strict Serenade, triggering his commander, Marchesa, and Esper Sentinel. Josh draws off of Esper Sentinel, and Cody puts a Reanimate into the graveyard. Then Ryan casts Talisman of Creativity, triggers Counterbalance, and reveals a Mana Confluence. Passes turn to Cody. On Cody's turn, he goes straight into combat and attacks Ryan for 3. Plays a Verdant Catacombs, and then passes turn to Josh. On Josh's turn, he plays a Monamo, and then casts Grafdigger's Cage, then casts Windfall. Everyone discards their hand and draws a fresh 7. After the second wheel of the game, Josh ships his turn. On Dylan's turn, he rolls for Mana Crypt, then casts Mox Opal, triggering Counterbalance, and then Esper Sentinel. He pays for Esper Sentinel, and an Arcane Signet gets revealed. Dylan casts Chromox, exiling a Rite of Flame, then casts Jeweled Lotus, then casts his commander Korvold, activates, then stacks his bird to Korvold with the draw trigger on the stack. Cody responds with the Orcish Bowmaster, target Ryan's bird. With the other trigger of Bowmaster, Dylan responds with Deflecting Swat, redirecting the damage back at Orcish Bowmaster. Then Dylan casts Sylvan Tutor. Ryan responds with a Force of Negation, triggering Esper Sentinel. Ryan pays. Then Dylan casts Ignoble Hierarch, and then passes turn to Ryan. On Ryan's turn, he casts Stella Lee for the second time. On Ryan's end step, Cody cracks his Verdant for Undercity Sewers, surveils, and keeps the card on top. Then on Cody's turn, he plays an Arid Mesa into a Mana Crypt, triggers Esper Sentinel. Josh draws, then Cody casts Talion. Josh's Counterbalance triggers, reveals a command tower. Then Cody casts Gilded Drake. he chooses Korvold and swaps with Dylan. He cracks his Arid Mesa and gets a Volcanic Island, and then passes turn to Josh. Josh plays the Command Tower. Then Arcane Signet, triggering Talion. He responds by casting Orcish Bowmaster, which triggers Talion again. ETB, he targets Ryan's Bird. Cody resolves the second draw, then pings Ryan's Bird again. We move on to Dylan's turn. He rolls for Mana Crypt, moves into combat and attacks with 6. Then plays a Misty Rainforest, fetches for a Bayou, and then passes turn to Ryan. On Ryan's turn, he plays Arid Mesa, fetches up a Steam Vent, and then casts Harmfell. Counterbalance triggers, and Esper Sentinel. Josh draws and reveals a Talisman of Dominance for counterbalance. Ryan pitches a Valakut Awakening to Harmfell, and exiles a Mindbreak Trap and a Shore Up. Then discards Otawara to get a Rhystic Study and a Brain Freeze. Ryan casts Rhystic Study. Josh responds by casting Path to Exile, targeting Stella Lee. Ryan responds with a Deflecting Swat. Cody responds with a Swan Song, triggers Esper Sentinel. Dylan responds with a Worldly Tutor and also triggers Josh's Esper Sentinel. Dylan tutors up a Worn Soul Trader. Ryan responds and puts a copy of Deflecting Swat on the stack, redirecting the Swan Song. The Path of Exile gets rid of Korvold. Cody tutors up an island. Stella Lee's ability resolves and exiles a Cyclonic Rift. On Cody's turn, he rolls for his Mana Crypt, then plays a Swamp. Cody casts Lotus Petal, triggering Esper Sentinel and Rhystic Study. He pays for both. Cody moves into combat and attacks Ryan. We move on to Josh's turn, and he plays a Spire of Industry, then casts Thassa's Oracle. Triggers Rhystic Study and Talion. Orcish Bowmaster targets Stella with the first draw, and Josh pays for Rhystic Study. Cody responds with a Pact of Negation, triggers Counterbalance and Esper Sentinel, and also Rhystic Study. Orcish Bowmaster triggers and pings Stella again. We resolve Counterbalance trigger, and Josh reveals a Talisman of Hierarchy. Pact of Negation counters Thassa's Oracle. Then Josh casts Karn, the Great Creator. Triggers Rhystic Study again. He draws, and Josh pings Stella Lee again. Cody responds by cracking his Lotus Petal for 1 red. Josh activates Karn and targets Cody's Mana Crypt. Then Cody casts Pyroblast, targeting Ryan's Rhystic Study. We move on to Dylan's turn. He rolls for Mana Crypt, takes 3, moves into combat and attacks Karn, then casts Land Elves. Then Warren Soul Trader. We move on to Ryan's turn. He plays Misty Rainforest and cracks it. In response, Cody casts Red Elemental Blast, targeting Stella Lee and triggering Esper Sentinel. Cody pays. Then Ryan puts in an island into play. Ryan casts Mana Vault, triggering Esper Sentinel and Counterbalance. Josh draws, reveals for Counterbalance, and gets a Jolted Awake, which counters Mana Vault. Then Ryan casts Cyclonic Rift, targeting the Karn and triggering Talion. Ryan activates Harmfell. Ryan pitches a Thundering Falls and exiles a Command Tower and a Flusterstorm. Then pitches a Twisted Fealty for a Snap and a Lion's Eye Diamond. He casts Lion's Eye Diamond, then recasts his commander, Stella Lee. Triggering Talion again, Cody draws. Then Ryan casts Snap, targeting Talion. Then Cody casts Fell into Profane, targeting Stella Lee, triggering Esper Sentinel. Josh draws. Stella Lee gets sent into the command zone again, and Talion goes back to Cody's hand. We move on to Cody's turn. He pays for his pack, plays an Otawara, then casts his Heuristic Study. Josh's Counterbalance and Esper Sentinel triggers. He draws and reveals a Displacer Kitten off a Counterbalance. Cody moves into combat and attacks Ryan with Marchesa. We move to Josh's turn. He plays Rafine's Tower, then casts Talisman of Dominance, triggering Rhystic Study. He pays. Then he casts Talisman of Hierarchy, triggering Rhystic Study. Not paying, triggering his Bowmaster and pinging Ignoble Hierarch. In response, Dylan sacrifices it to Warren Soul Trader. He nets a treasure. Then Josh recasts Karn, the Great Creator. Triggers Rhystic Study again, then triggers his Bowmaster, and then he pings Land Elves, and Dylan also sacks that to Warren Soul Trader. Josh activates Karn, targeting Dylan's Mana Crypt. On Dylan's turn, he plays City of Brass and then passes to Ryan. On Ryan's turn, he draws his card and immediately passes to Cody. On Cody's turn, he plays Marsh Flats, fetches for a bad land, casts a Flesh Duplicate, triggers Counterbalance, and Josh reveals a Silence off a Counterbalance. In response, Dylan uses Warren Soul Trader to sacrifice Gilded Drake. Cody's Flesh Duplicate copies Orcish Bowmaster and then pings Josh's Orcish Bowmaster. Then recasts Talion, naming 1. He moves into combat and attacks Ryan for 3. We move on to Josh's turn and he opens up with a Silence, triggering Talion and Rhystic Study. Josh pays for the first Rhystic Study, then casts his commander Tivit, triggering Rhystic Study. Cody draws. With Tivit's ETB, Josh nets 2 treasures and 3 clues. Then Josh casts Tainted Pact, triggering Rhystic. Cody draws, and then stops at Time Sieve. Activates Karn's ability and destroys Cody's Mox Diamond. Activates Time Sieve and sacrifices 5 artifacts. Then Josh proceeds to move into combat with Tivit, attacking each of his opponents, netting 5 artifacts, being able to repeat taking an extra turn with Time Sieve. Good job, Josh. Kudos to you again, Josh, for pulling off that win there. Everybody saw that Silence coming up, so I bet everyone was spooked when it went to your turn. Endgame summation. Ideally, you cast your spells before the draw engines hit the board, so get those tutors and instant spells out you want to cast before a Rhystic, or in this case, a Esper Sentinel hit the board. I always aim to min-max, and you had Cody and Dylan playing black, so potential for ad naus or spells that utilize their life. So I would have kept the Mana Crypts on board and hit other 0 rocks before that. Cody had a Red Blast and a Pyroblast he used on Ryan. Ryan was so far in the hole after that point. I don't think destroying his Rhystic Study needed to be done at that point. You could have held it back if he tried to combo, maybe then use the blast to target it. I know having Rhystic Study on board is super spooky, but maybe he could have drawn some interaction and maybe help counter that Silence that went off. As soon as that shore up popped up, obviously the thought crossed my mind. I'm like, who can I potentially take out with Shore Up and Stella? And if you've casted enough spells, you can attack and pump it infinitely and then take out one player there. Probably not an ideal way to spend your mana or take out one player, but the thought did cross my mind. Our next event coming up, Grim Night at Darkside. It's on October 12th. It's Saturday. Entry is $40. Top 4 will get a Grim Monolith each, and first place will get a Duskmourn Collector's Box. So you can head to Darkside Games to register for the event. Some of the plays some of the guys did, I was questioning, and I had to go watch the uncut version with the audio just to understand their reasoning, basically hear their yap for what it was. And if you want to see that uncut version, you can join us on Patreon, like these guys. And the anchors of this channel are patrons. Our content consumers tier 2, Big Yoda at 8, Aaron at 6, Marcus at 6, Dylan at 5, Troy at 5, and Rodrigo at 2. Our cardboard cutouts tier 3, Wong at 10, Matt at 9, Albert at 9, and Joyner at 4. Thank you again, and if you want access to these uncut games, join us on patreon.com/cardboardcontent. See you next round for our semis for more content.